Welcome to part 2 of Formative Assessment. I am your host and formative guide, Meredith Godsall. Last week we discussed the first formative assessment technique, checking for understanding of the learning target. This week we are going to be looking at the second technique, creating clear success criteria for your students. This technique can be used in all subjects, but my example is going to center around Grade 4, Week 26 of the NYC DOE Science Curriculum. But even though I am talking about this in the context of science, my breakdown of success criteria is general enough that it can easily be applied to all subjects. So when we look at the lessons for each week, you may have noticed this helpful slide, the Teacher Support Students with Disability slide. This gives you a lot of helpful tips, programs, and components to use to help your students with IEPs achieve their goals. The component we are going to focus on is formative assessment. But Meredith, what is a formative assessment? And didn't you talk about them already? Good question. A formative assessment is the component of your lesson where you gather and interpret information about your students' understanding so you are able to better assist their needs. It's a big topic with lots of applications, so this week's video is about a different application of formative assessment. Simply put, all techniques of formative assessment are a check for understanding. But don't stop at checking. Make sure you use and relate the information back to your student so you can work together to fill in any gaps and push their learning forward. Please remember, formative assessment is a process you do with the child, not to the child. Okay, that sounds good, but why do I need to use a formative assessment? I have a lot on my plate during a lesson, so this had better be worth it. Don't worry, it totally is. Firstly, as a special education teacher, you know that your number one priority is helping your students achieve their IEP goals. Formative assessment will make that goal attainable by helping you monitor and track their understanding of a lesson and its objectives. Secondly, the information you get from formative assessment, especially this week's technique, gives you a glimpse into your students' thought process. So, if they're noticing something off in left field, you will be able to conference with them and help them get back on course. Thirdly, sharing and using formative assessment feedback with students helps them to build confidence and conceptualize what they're learning, as well as what complete understanding looks like. And if that isn't enough, it will also help you rate in the advanced category on your teacher evaluation. So what's not to love? Remember, using assessment in instruction is one of the 8 components within the 4 domains rated under advance and is a measure of effective teacher practice. The process of formative assessment can be conducted before, during, or after a lesson and can be used to monitor and check progress of students' IEP goals. As educators, we can utilize various tools and resources such as checklists, question stems, performance tasks, and student responses such as thumbs up, thumbs down, using an individual whiteboard, exit slips, and many others. For this week's lesson, we are going to talk about the formative assessment technique, success criteria. Maybe this is a phrase that's bounced around your school like it has mine. Success criteria, thinking job, thought habit, whatever the words you use, it all comes back to the same idea. Success criteria are the habits you wish your students to demonstrate to show a complete understanding of a topic. Important note. The success criteria should be similar, if not the same, for the duration of the unit. For example, in math, we're doing fractions. So one of the success criteria students are to follow is, good mathematicians notice the denominator of a fraction. That's going to follow them through fractions, mixed numbers, etc. So remember, success criteria should be something you want them to notice every single time they look at a text, a problem type, or an assignment. Don't worry, I'm also going to give some science-specific examples. So why do we use success criteria? As we previously discussed, success criteria are the habits we want students to have, so they have a complete understanding of a topic. If your students are just saying the words on the page, they aren't really reading. They're repeating. And we don't want them to just repeat, we want them to notice what's going on and synthesize the information they are receiving. What do you notice about blank? Is one of my favorite catchphrases in class. And everyone, it's wearing off on the students. They are now not only noticing the specific things I want them to, but starting to notice additional things too. It is so cool to see. Plus, it shows me that my students aren't just spitting back what I've said aloud, but really understanding what they are doing. This use of success criteria will, 1, develop the habit of thinking about what they are learning, and 2, develop the habit of explaining their thought process. I would love my students to have those habits, but how do I create them? The answer? We clearly state what we want them to do, and then we practice, practice, practice. So, with that being said, I'm going to share one of my favorite strategies for communicating success criteria with my students. I emphasize the with because I am not just telling them the success criteria. I am having them practice it repeatedly. So at the start of each lesson, I ask students to write down the success criteria in their notebooks, spiral or digital. Please note, even if my success criteria has stayed the same throughout the entire unit, and we're on unit 3, lesson 12, I still have them write it down. I want this to constantly be refreshed in their brain. Then, in the text boxes on the side, I have them notice and note while they complete the activity. While they practice, I go through and monitor the posts and respond as needed with questions to help probe my students' thinking. Then, I use what is learned about my students' noticings to shape feedback and next instructional steps or assignments. Now that you have an overview, let's see it in action. To implement this week's strategy, we are going to use Google Slides. You can access this through your G Suite. I have news! You don't have to make your own slides. The slides provided by the DOE are perfect for this activity. They are free, already made, and easy to access. You aren't starting from scratch. You are adding your success criteria and your check-in boxes to the pre-done slide by using a text box. Let's check out this quick tutorial on text boxes. Here's your tutorial on how to make a text box on Google Slide. First, open Google Slides. Next, I'm going to click File, Make a Copy, Entire Presentation. Click OK, and your copy will be made. On your copy, you're going to go to the text box button. Click on that. Draw your text box, and you can type away. Pro tip, pause the video here, go and practice, and then resume the video. Now that I'm working with a bunch of text box masters, let's put those text boxes to use for week 26 of our science curriculum. So first things first, open up your Google Slide presentation. Once that's open, head down to the lesson objective slide. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe an example of transforming a pattern into another form while still communicating the same information. Success criteria. Good scientists notice words, phrases, and ideas from the lesson objective in the text. Good scientists note how the words, phrases, and ideas relate to the lesson objective. All right, so students, today you are going to be completing these tasks, always keeping in mind what good scientists do. Please go through and write down this slide in your notebook now. I will give you between 3 and 4 minutes to get it done, and then I will check in to make sure everyone has completed writing down this slide. After completing the model and introduction in slide 5, I'm going to head down to where my notice and notes are. All right, students, so remember, what words, phrases, or ideas relate or related to the lesson objective did you notice in the text? Note the words, phrases, or ideas in the notice and note box. So I'm going to start out by reading you a paragraph. I will be stopping, thinking, and noting the words, phrases, or ideas that I've seen in the text that were also in the lesson objective. Signal transfer information. The clicks that are used in Morse code are sent over long distances. They are one kind of signal. A signal is the way that a word, symbol, or code is sent over a distance. That paragraph gave me a lot to think about. And I'm just going to quickly look back at my lesson objective to help me remember exactly what I'm looking for. So, describe an example of transforming a pattern into another form while still communicating the same information. So the word that's sticking out to me there is communicating. And so I'm noticing that signals transform. That sounds similar. I'll keep that in the back of my mind. But they communicate a message. Signals communicate a message, communicate the same information. That seems pretty similar. So I'm going to notice that Morse code communicates information. Great. That seems pretty good. So now in this next paragraph, you are going to take me through your noticings and I will note them in the text box. Once we finish this, you will do one on your own while I check in with each of you to see how you are doing. Teachers, once you've finished this explicit instruction, check in with your students to make sure they understand the expectations. Then complete the guided practice and then send them off to do their independent work. Once you're done with your explicit instruction and your guided practice, you will move into independent practice. I recommend putting the slide on Google Classroom and making a copy for each student. They can complete their independent work in that slide, coming back to the example as a reference. Check out the example of the independent work I have here. Notice the success criteria are listed on one slide. The instructions are at the top and the areas for them to fill in are on the side. While they work, I pop through different students' slides to see what they are noticing. I can give them feedback and then continue on. If the whole class is running into the same problem, I can stop the class, point out the trend, and review. So let's review. In this lesson, we defined what formative assessment is, defined success criteria, reviewed why formative assessment and the technique of success criteria are important for students with disabilities, modeled how to create a text box, modeled how to use Google Slides to implement the formative assessment and build the habit of success criteria. And finally, I modeled explicit instruction of implementing success criteria. But Meredith, I have so many students. How am I supposed to keep track of all this at once? Don't worry, I understand. We all have a lot of students, and that's why next week's video, we are going to be talking about the management of formative assessment by use of breakout rooms and a targeted teaching plan. But for now, I'm Meredith Godsall. Thank you for joining me, and have a successful week.